Hello and welcome to section 2 of chapter 12, treatment and therapy for AP psychology. Happy St. Patrick's Day, by the way. That's why I'm rocking the green. You can teach from home in the tank top, a little weird. Today we're looking at kinds of psychotherapy. So let's get into it right here. First off, we're going to talk about the oldest type of psychotherapy in terms of, the science of psychology is psychodynamic therapy, which traces back to Freud, which, looking at the cartoon here, based on sitting on the couch, and then the therapist is out of sight, and they're just letting people talk, and they're observing, and so we have a hamburger here going to get help from hamburger helper. Ha ha ha. If you grew up in a suburb, you probably don't know what that hamburger helper is, but if you grew up in a trailer park like me, or apartment complex, you definitely know what hamburger helper is. So this is the classic Freudian style. And so it kind of evolved into psychoanalysis, to talk about dreams in your childhood to reveal the unconscious reasons for their symptoms, the id, the ego, and the superego. They're looking for patterns. They're looking for things that maybe that they don't want to talk about, or things they get hung up on, that they have a fixation. And so from there, they can unlock what the problem is. And so once they can get the insight and the emotional release of the aha, the eureka moment that, oh, it's my mother, or it's a dog that bit me as a child, that release of the energy would cause the disorder to go away. And so the patient says whatever comes to mind, which is free association. They just talk about what's going on in their life. It takes a long time. It took a lot of sessions, and it didn't always work. There's no scientific proof that the id, the ego, and the superego actually exist. So if you evolve a little bit further into psychodynamic theory, which is the modern kind of equivalent to this, it evolved from Freud's methods, but there's no id, there's no ego, no superego. They share the goal of depth in therapy. They're really trying to unlock what's going on. They're going in deep into a person's life, trying to get to know them, trying to build a rapport with the patient. And they're looking for transference, where they transfer emotional elements of their inner life outward on the analyst. Looking for fixation, things like that, and then hoping to, kind of figure out what's the key that unlocks all of these problems. The patient can see their own emotional conflicts, and they can resolve them, which is what they're really kind of aiming for. Today, they face the client, they actively participate. They don't just sit there and write down what they talk about for an hour here. This is from the great Far Side cartoons, and this guy's laying on the couch, and he just wrote just plain nuts. Usually this takes 15 to 25 sessions, which is very expensive. It's time consuming, and it doesn't guarantee that it's going to work. And so that's why insurance corporations, especially, are willing to just prescribe drugs. If this looks familiar, Step Brothers, this was kind of a psychodynamic thing where they fell in love. And yes, it's Step Brothers, so it's kind of weird. So let's move on to behavior and cognitive therapy. So behaviorist, or the learning perspectives, looking at the rewards and the punishers. We're looking at the consequences of behavior. So they get to the problem and the reinforcers. So basically that the issue is being reinforced positively, negatively, trying to alleviate that. If you can identify the reinforcers, you can eliminate the consequences, and then theoretically, if you eliminate the consequences, the behavior will extinguish, and you get extinction, and it goes away. So the picture here, once again from the Far Side, drawbacks to cut rate behavior modification. They have a cigarette on the mousetrap there. That's Rubes, not Far Side. Cognitive is where you're looking at your mental set, where your mental perspective on your beliefs, your thought processes, your mental sets, like I said, cause the problem. You're trying to change your perspective. So every time something happens, maybe somebody becomes very negative, very pessimistic, and trying to unlock different ways to think about things, to process and believe things about what's going on. So if we go on further, behavior therapy is based on applied behavioral analysis. It's based on classical and operant conditioning. And so there's some things you can do, like exposure, which is graduated exposure to treat fears and panics. And so slowly exposing people to, something they're fearful of. And so maybe they have a fear of snakes. And so to expose them to that, you get a stuffed animal snake, something that's fluffy and that's nice and that's positive, and you kind of slowly, build up their trust and their well feelings, and then you move them into a room with snakes, and maybe they just watch them, and then maybe eventually they touch a snake, and it's a very slow process. It takes a long time. You're not just, doing like the old school, like throw a kid in the pond and say, hey, swim. That's not what they're doing. So you think about the traumatic event until the panic goes away. For anxiety disorders, flooding is where the therapist takes the client to the feared situation and remains there until the person's panic or anxiety decline. If you watch the Maury Povich videos on phobias, he likes to do those, or on YouTube, look them up. Like there's a lady who has a fear of pickles. He takes her to a pickle factory, which is just silly. That's flooding. So graduated exposure is more like baby steps from the movie like What About Bob? The journey of 1,000 miles begins with baby steps. You also have systematic desensitization, which is an older behavior method, which is the step-by-step process of breaking down the client's conditioned associations, which is kind of what I alluded to in the last slide, talking about, slowly but surely building up, hey, the stuffed snake, and then you're in a room with a snake, and then you watch the snake, and then you touch the snake, and slowly you're building and you're removing that fear, removing the negative consequences. It's also called counter-conditioning. John Watson did counter-conditioning with little Albert in terms of the white fluffy beard and the rabbit by, teaching him to lose his fear of those things. And so less frightening into more frightening things get over phobias. This is, a large spider 5 meters away doesn't seem scary at all anymore. And there's a giant spider behind him. Don't tell him spiders are scary. Behavior self-monitoring, where people will they identify the reinforcers. They look at what's going on. They look at they keep a journal of the positive, negative reinforcements and the punishments that are going on. And so by doing that, they can unlock that, hey, every time this happens, I'm rewarding myself or something, eating disorders, for instance. And maybe like every time that I have a bad day, I have sweets. And so I'm, trying to overcome this. And so they can eliminate the consequence and get better. And that's why they identify why something occurs, and they can modify behavior and get over it. There's skills training, which is the use of operant conditioning techniques, modeling, role-playing to teach skills to a client might lack. Some people cannot handle their anger. They don't have the techniques. They've never been taught how to safely and ethically and societally, that's accepted, deal with their anger. People with the temper may learn ways to control their anger instead of just launching birds at pigs. Maybe you learn to go for a walk, or maybe you do scream therapy in a room by yourself, or you do yoga or something. And so trying to teach new skills on how to handle these issues. Cognitive is where you look at the thoughts and motivations that can influence your behavior. Cognitive therapy helps clients see their beliefs and expectations that might fuel the problems. It teaches critical thinking instead of just coming up with the easy answer or the scapegoat all the time, like thanks Obama or dang Trump, that's all your fault. Looking at what really is going on, and it's easy to point the finger. Albert Ellis, his rational emotive behavior therapy, is one of the best known schools of therapy. The therapist uses rational arguments to directly challenge a client's unrealistic beliefs and expectations, kind of playing the devil's advocate. Teachers love doing this in class, where they challenge people's beliefs, even if they agree with them, but they're trying to get to the core of why you believe those and trying to get rid of, irrational arguments and look at really why, with reasons and facts and data, that you believe certain things. People that are emotionally upset often overgeneralize. They think that everyone's out to get them. And so you try to eliminate the emotion and allow reason and logic to come back into the cognitive techniques of thinking. And so many people catastrophize, which means if this happens, it's over. If he doesn't hold the door open for me in the restaurant, I'm breaking up with him, we're getting a divorce or whatever. That's looking at the worst possible outcome that could happen. It challenges to show the client why they're irrational, why they're misguided, all these things, instead of always jumping to your conclusions, that your preset notions. Most psychologists believe in a combination of all this stuff. Cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, very popular. And so it's an eclectic approach to psychotherapy. Moving on to the Humanist and Existential Therapy. So Humanist, remember, is Carl Rogers. It's the power of positive thinking. We use the mnemonic. We talk to our pinky, and you're a good little pinky, and you're big enough, and you're smart enough, and gosh darn it, people like you, and you can grow up to be the leader and the index finger someday. So Humanist therapy, people seek self-actualization and self-fulfillment, which is insight therapy. They're really trying to find what completes them. They're trying to find themselves. They don't dwell on the past, but they try to make their clients feel better. They kind of boost their self-esteem. After many years of therapy, Waldo finally finds himself, would be an insight therapy. So it frees themselves from their self-imposed limits. I can't do this, the can't's a four-letter word, and it's really the positive thinking that you can do anything if you apply yourself. Client-centered or non-directive therapy is another thing by Carl Rogers, where you listen to the clients in an accepting, non-judgmental way, and you give unconditional positive regard, which is you love them and you care for them no matter what, even with their mistakes and their trials and tribulations throughout life. So you're going to build up their self-esteem. This was big in the 80s and the early 90s in schools. Really big to, the Gen X, they were taught about self-esteem and make sure that you feel good about yourself. Therapists are warm, they're friendly, they use empathy. This is a clip I can't show up. It's from SNL. Stuart Smalley used to do "I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and gosh darn it, people like me." Look it up on the Saturday Night Live. It's pretty good. Existential therapies where clients explore the meaning of existence. Like, why do you live? Why are we here? There's got to be some higher calling is what they're looking for. And so the power to choose one's destiny is Irvin Yalom. The meaning of life is to give life a meaning and try to figure out what you're doing here, not just making money and consuming goods. There's got to be a higher purpose. So it helps people cope with the realities of life, with death, with finding meaning. This sounds very much like religion. It's very, very similar to what religion teaches a lot of times, and why you're here and what's the purpose of life. Viktor Frankl developed this form after surviving Nazi concentration camps. So if you're going through something as terrible as the Nazi concentration camps, there's a reason you're here, so you better make the most of your life and not just, waste it on frivolous details and waste your life away. Then you have family and couples therapy, which if you're bored, if you're quarantined, whatever, you're stuck at home, go look at awkward family photos. This is where I stole a lot of these pictures. They're really funny. So family therapists target how problems are created and sustained by the family dynamics. Every family is like a little government in itself. You have a leader, there's a power struggle, there's a hierarchy, and it's very interesting for people to observe. Salvador Minuchin thought that the family was a kaleidoscope. Family members are often unaware of how they affect other members, being the oldest or the middle child or the baby, or, if parents are a large gap in age, or if it's single mom or single dad or step parents, you name it. Families are so different, and everyone brings their own attitudes, their own perspectives, their own personalities to the table, and it changes how the family functions together. So a family system's perspective is that people's behavior in the family is interconnected, that families feed off each other, that sometimes they can become more negative because they all are negative toward each other, and it's a downward spiral. Things can also go in the positive, where everyone kind of boosts them. They're an optimistic family, and families can overcome hardships. And so if a family member changes, each of the family members have to change as well in terms of their thinking, their thought process, their behavior, even if looking at habits. If it's, we're not going to eat meat anymore, if the parents decide we're going to go plant-based diet, the whole family has to do that. And so everyone has to change. And that's not really psychology, but it's an example that's maybe a little more tangible for you. Couples therapy aims to understand and resolve inevitable conflicts that occur in relationships. That's what happens when couples are together. I mean, if you live together and you can get along, you can do it. Living together is completely different than dating. If you ever are serious about a relationship, you want to make sure it's going to last, try a road trip together, because you can't escape each other. You're there in the car, the vehicle, the whole way. You're going across the country, and you go through all the range of emotions. If you can handle the road trip, you can do it. And so couples therapy, some people can't handle that. It's funny with the quarantine going on right now with the coronavirus. I mean, in 9 months, we're going to either see a boom in babies or we're going to see a boom in divorces, or maybe both, because people are stuck at home and they have to find ways to cope. So couples learn to accept and live with the qualities instead of trying to change them. So don't try to change your partner. They are who they are. Accept them. You're not going to fix them. Quit trying to fix people, okay? And then psychotherapy in practice, another awkward family photo there. Many psychotherapists take an integrative approach. They're going to try a little bit of everything. They're trying whatever works, what works best for the patient. The ultimate goal is to help them feel better, to function better in society, in their family, in their relationships. All successful therapies, no matter what, share being able to motivate a client to want to change. So the desire that I need to fix this, to create a hopeful and attainable life. And that's about it. That's all I have for this section. Got a little preview for the next one. If you have any questions, let me know. I hope you got something out of this. Take care.